Field. My name is Cardigan Connor. I'm the Minister for Health, Tourism and Sports. And today's event, which is consultation on the Sports Act 2026, I'll start with a word of prayer. I pray, dear God, for guidance. I pray that as we go through this consultation, that you be with us, those who are here in the building and those who are following online. We ask that we are receptive to all views from all concerned as we take the Sports Act forward for the benefit of the youth and for the people of Anguilla. Sports, Father, has the ability of uniting people from across religions, from races. And for us in Anguilla, it is important that as a government, we put in place something that can benefit our athletes. We ask again for your guidance. In this we pray. Amen. I'm also tasked with the welcome of this consultation, again, as I said, on the Sports Act 2026. And the good thing is that for me, I'm a team player, and this evening I've got a team of 5. And to my left is my colleague in the House of Assembly, the Honorable Jason Bryan, who's also an assistant when it comes to the Ministry of Sports. To my right is my PS, Karim Hodge. To his right is the Director of Sports, Delano Mussington. And to the far left, we want to make sure that there's at least one woman at the head table, and that is the Deputy Director, Katrina Richardson. So again, as I mentioned earlier, the idea is that we go through the consultation of the Sports Act, and my PS will take us through the act, and we are very receptive to those who are online to be able to give us your views as to how you see us taking this act forward. So again, we're looking to take it to the House on Friday for the first reading, but again, that is just the first step, and any adjustments or amendments that needs to be made to the act will be done so over a period of time. But what is vitally important is that everyone has an input, a yea or a nay, but for all the nays, it is still a case of what would you do instead. No is not an answer, it's how are we going to get it done right. So, PS, have you got a hand over to you?
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Minister. Listening public, this is an important milestone for Anguilla in terms of putting together a very comprehensive bill for the Sports Act. So how we'll proceed with the consultation is I will proceed by reading through the objects and reasons of the bill. And while they're very comprehensive, they link directly to the actual clauses in the Act. So without further ado, I will start the process in reference to reading through the objects and reasons. I just want to say the purpose of this act is to establish a clear and proportionate legal framework for the governance, coordination, and development of organized sport in Anguilla. We all know sports plays an important role in Anguillan life. It supports community connections, contributes to health and well-being, provides opportunities for young people, and enable Anguilla to participate with pride in regional and international competitions. Sport in Anguilla has developed through a combination of committed volunteers, community organizations, and internationally affiliated bodies. This act builds on that foundation by introducing a consistent legal structure to support good governance, safeguarding, and financial accountability, while recognizing the practical realities of a small island with limited resources. The framework of this act is intended to be workable and proportionate. It clearly creates a pathway that supports organizations at different stages of the development, provides access to guidance and technical assistance, and encourages gradual strengthening of governance standards over time. Furthermore, the Act gives effect to the objectives of the National Sports Policy of 2017, including the establishment of a statutory framework for sport. It also recognizes Anguilla's status as a British overseas territory and the role of regional and international sporting bodies in governing participation in sports. Now I will look at the objects of the bill. The bill has the following main purposes: to establish a clear institutional framework for sport, including defining the respective roles of the Minister, the Department of Sports, and the Anguilla Sport Council, and ensuring that policy, regulation, and operational functions are properly distinguished. 2, to establish the Anguilla Sports Council as an independent statutory body responsible for recognizing and regulating sports organizations, setting standards for governance and safeguarding, and recommending national sports programs for funding. 3, to introduce a 3-track recognition framework that reflects the diversity of sports in Anguilla, providing for full recognition of established organizations, provisional recognitions of developing organizations, and recognition of community sports contributors. 4, to declare boat racing as the national sport of Anguilla, recognizing its cultural and historical significance. 5, to strengthen safeguarding and welfare protections for children and vulnerable persons participating in sports, including in relation to visiting overseas coaches and personnel. 6, to provide a national sporting duty, including protection for employees selected to represent Anguilla in sport. And 7, to support the use of the sports fund as a dedicated mechanism for supporting sport with a clear and accountable framework for the allocation and the use of the funds in that fund mechanism. Now I will look at part 1 of the Act. I'll speak to part 1 of the Act, looking at the preliminary interpretations. Clause 1, interpretation. This clause defines, under Clause 1, interpretation, define all of the principal terms that are used throughout the Act. Under Clause 2, speaks to the application of the Act. This clause provides that the Act applies to both organized sport carried on within Anguilla and to participation by persons representing Anguilla in regional and international sporting events. Subsection 2 of the Act confirms that the Act does not limit the operation of any other enactment. Other legislation, including child protection and employment legislation, continues to apply alongside the Act. Part 2 of the Act looks at overall the objects and general principles. Under Clause 3, the object of the Act. This clause sets out the objects of the Act. The stated objects include the establishment of a proportionate and workable governance framework, the promotion of inclusive participation at all levels, support for athletes and sporting organizations consistent with available resources, the promotion of integrity and fairness, the safeguarding of children and vulnerable persons, the facilitation of regional and international participation, and the recognition of sport as a contributor to national development and well-being. This clause serves both as a statement of legislative purpose and as an interpretive guide. Where a provision is ambiguous, it should be interpreted in a manner that advances the objects of the Act. Clause 4 under Part 2 speaks about national sports. This clause declares boat racing to be the national sport of Anguilla. The declaration gives formal recognition to the long-established sporting and cultural tradition. The Minister, the Department, and the Council are required within available resources to make reasonable steps to promote, preserve, and support boat racing as part of Anguilla's sporting and cultural heritage. In doing so, they are to have regard to its cultural and historical significance, the preservation of traditional practices, and the promotion of a safe and sustainable participation. The clause makes clear that the declaration does not create any enforceable right to government funding. Under Part 3, it speaks to ministerial responsibility for the sport. Clause 5, the functions of the minister is outlined. The minister may give the council written general policy directions, for example, directing it to prioritize youth sports or community sport programs. These directions must be consistent with the Act and must not relate to specific disputes, disciplinary matters, or selection decisions. Clause 6 under Part 3 speaks to general policy direction. This clause provides that the minister may give the council written general policy directions that are consistent with the Act. The power is intended to enable the minister to set overall policy priorities without becoming involved in the individual operational decisions. Subsection 4 of Clause 6 subsection 4 makes clear that the power may not be used in relation to specific disputes, again, disciplinary matters or selection process. This preserves the autonomy of the council and of the sports organizations in those areas. Under Clause 7 of Part 3 speaks to delegation. The minister may delegate functions to a public officer subject to conditions. The power to give general policy directions cannot be delegated. That must remain with the minister personally. A delegation does not prevent the minister from exercising the delegated function directly if needed. 8 speaks to the role of the Department of Sports. This clause outlined the role of the Department of Sport. It identifies the department as a government's operational body for sport. The department's functions includes the management and development of public sporting facilities, the implementation of national sports programs and initiatives approved by the minister, support for compliance with the Act, administration of government sports budget, maintenance of relationships with regional and international sporting bodies on behalf of government, and the provision of agreed administrative and logistical support to the council. Subsection 3 of Clause 8 speaks to distinguish the respective roles of the department and the council. The council is responsible for recognition, regulation, coordination, funding recommendations, and advice on policy. The department is responsible for operational implementation, facilities management, and administration of government budgetary allocations for sports. Neither body may assume the functions of the other without ministerial agreement. Subsection 4 of Clause 8 requires the department and the council to review their respective work programs at least annually and to agree on a schedule of cooperation for the following year. Subsection 5 provides a mechanism for either body to refer any dispute about their respective responsibilities of the minister for determination. Clause 9 speaks of guide to rules and responsibilities. This clause provides a plain language guide as to who does what under the Act. It is intended to assist sports administrators, coaches, officials, athletes, and members of the public in understanding the overall structure of the framework. The guide explains in simple terms the respective roles of the minister, the department, the council, and recognized sports organizations. The clause expressly states it is a guide only and does not override the operative provisions of the Act. The Anguilla Sports Council under Part 4, Clause 10, it speaks to the establishment of the Sports Council. This clause establishes the Anguilla Sports Council as the principal statutory body for sports governance in Anguilla. It is the body that recognizes sports associations, supports athletes and organizations, recommends funding priorities to the minister, and advises on sports policy. Clause 11, the status of council. This clause establishes the council as a body corporate with legal personality. It may own property, enter into contracts, and sue or be sued in its own name. to protect public funds, subsection 3 provides that the council may not borrow money or enter into any financial commitments above a prescribed threshold without written approval of the Minister of Finance. Clause 12, composition of the council. This clause provides for a council between 5 and 7 members appointed by the minister. The size of the council is intended to remain manageable in the context of a small jurisdiction. The minister must have regard to desirability of appointing persons with relevant expertise, including sports administration, finance or accounting, law or governance, medicine or athlete welfare, and safeguarding of minors. The clause also provides for designation of a chairperson and a deputy chairperson and clarifies the arrangements for presiding at meetings of the council. Clause 13, minimum membership and continuity of council. This clause provides that a council can continue to function in its membership if its membership falls below the minimum number through resignation, debt removal, or other causes. It requires the minister to restore the council minimum membership within a stated period and provides a temporary mechanism to maintain continuity where the number of remaining members is insufficient to form a quorum. Clause 14 speaks of appointment and tenure. This clause provides that members hold office for up to a term of 3 years and may be reappointed. It also provides for resignation and for removal on grounds stated, namely inability to perform function of office or misbehavior. Clause 15, the functions of the council. This clause sets out the functions of the council. These include advising the Minister on Sports and on the development and implementation of national sports policy, recognizing and maintaining a register of sports organizations, promoting coordination among sports bodies, supporting participation at all levels, promoting safeguarding, integrity, and athlete welfare, recommending national sports programs for funding, promoting Anguilla as a venue for sporting events, collaborating with the Department of Education and school authorities on school sport, working collaboratively with the department, facilitating access to technical and external support, and performing any other functions conferred by law. Subsection 2, under Clause 15, requires the council to have regard to available administrative and financial resources of the ministry and the practical capacity of sports organizations. This is intended to ensure the council's approach remains proportionate and workable. Clause 16, community sports contributors. This clause introduces a mechanism for recognizing and supporting individuals who contribute meaningfully to sports at a community or school level on a voluntary basis without affiliation to recognized or provisionally recognized organizations. It gives formal recognition to volunteer coaches, community sports organizations, and individuals who train school-age children without payment or institutional backing, and persons who play a long-standing and important role in development of sport in Anguilla. Recognition as a community sports contributor gives access to public sporting facilities on the same basis as recognized sports organizations, access to council-supported training and coaching accreditation, and at no reduced cost, and eligibility to apply for community sports grants. The grant may be used for equipment, participant travel and entry fees, basic training cost, and related approved cost. The clause also establishes basic safeguarding conditions for recognition. A community sports contributor must complete approved safeguarding awareness training, comply with applicable safeguarding guidance, and provide written declaration confirming that they have no recorded conviction for an offense against a minor or any sexual offense that they are aware of, the statutory disqualifications applicable to such offenses. These requirements are designed to be proportionate while ensuring a minimum level of protection for minors. The accountability requirements for such grants are deliberately light. A recipient must submit a brief written account of expenditure, participant numbers, and receipts or other evidence of expenditure, and return any unspent balances unless the council agrees otherwise. The clause makes clear that there is no entitlement to recognition or to a grant. The council is required to maintain a record of recognized community sports contributors and grants, and to include a summary in its annual report. It must also determine and publish procedures and a criteria for the award of community sport grants. Under Clause 17, the powers of the council. This clause confers on the council the powers necessary to perform its functions. The general power in subsection 1 extends to all things reasonably necessary or incidental to the performance of those functions. Subsection 2 includes the specific examples such as requesting information, issuing guidance, establishing committees, engaging external persons, and collaborating with local, regional, and international bodies. Subsection 3 allows the council to provide technical assistance to recognized, provisionally recognized, and other sports organizations and sports development entities operating in Anguilla, regardless of their level of formality. This includes assistance with constitutions, financial management systems, and safeguarding policies. It also allows council to recruit and coordinate volunteers with relevant expertise, including members of the Anguillan diaspora, in order to support organizations that cannot readily access professional services. Subsection 4 requires the council to develop and publish simple financial management templates for use by organizations without access to professional accounting support. Clause 18, the secretary and staff of the council. This clause gives the council express authority to appoint a secretary and such other staff as are necessary for the performance of its functions. It clarifies that persons appointed by the council are employed by the council and are not public officers, while also allowing secondment of public officers and interim administrative support by the department before the council has appointed its own staff. Clause 19 speaks to meetings and procedures. This clause provides that the council regulates its own procedures. It sets the quorum as a majority of members for the time being in office, and provides that decisions are taken by a majority of members present and voting. The council must also keep proper minutes, which are to be made available to the minister upon request. The clause further provides for a casting vote where votes are tied, and requires the council to meet at least four times in a calendar year. Clause 20 speaks to committees. This clause permits the council to establish committees and to include on those committees persons who are not members of the council. This allows the council to draw on expertise beyond its formal membership. Disclosure of interests. This clause requires council members who have a direct or indirect interest in a matter before the council to disclose that interest and not take part in any deliberations or decisions on the matter. Part 5 of the Act. Sorry. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the invitation to be here today. And I appreciate what the permanent secretary is doing. But by my reckoning, at this rate, the discussion session will be over by the time you finish reading this. There are 13 or 14 sections. You've taken a half an hour to read 4. By my reckoning, it will take you almost to the end of the 2-hour session to finish this. So I am just wondering if that will achieve this evening's objectives. And since all of us here have a copy of the act in our hands, and I know that it's probably going beyond this, but I just wonder if perhaps we ought not to perhaps consider the 4 sections that you have dealt with, reached already, some other way, because if you just read all of these, we will be at 7 o'clock before we are able to discuss anything about the act. Thank you. About the bill.
Yep. We'll just finish 5, and then if there are any questions or suggestions, then we're quite happy to accept them. Thank you.
Part 5 will continue by reading part 5. Then we, as the Honorable Minister mentioned, we'll take questions at that juncture. And if those questions take us to 7 o'clock, but that's not the end of it, please know you still have the opportunity to write in your concerns to the ministry. And we will take those on board as well. We provide our email addresses and if necessary. So I'll finish clause 5, and then we could get to some questions based on the first 4 parts of the bill. This is a discussion. So part 5 speaks to recognition and regulation of sports organizations. Part 5, Clause 22 speaks of recognition of sports organizations. This clause provides that a council may recognize an organization as a sports organization for the purpose of the Act. Recognition provides the basis for access to support under the Act, including eligibility for government support, the sports fund, and participation in domestic arrangements for representing Angola in sport. Subsection 3 makes clear that nothing in this Act requires an organization to seek recognition. It also provides that absence from recognition under the Act does not affect any right an organization may have to affiliate to an international sports federation or participate in competition governed by federation rules. This means that a body like the Angola Football Association, which operates under FIFA's rules and governance framework, is entirely free to continue doing so without seeking recognition under the Act. Clause 23, criteria for recognition. This clause sets out the criteria for full recognition. An organization must be properly constituted and have transparent, accountable, and participatory governance arrangements. Have appropriate financial management and accountability arrangements. Have adopted safeguarding policies and basis, complaints handling procedures consistent with the Act, and meet any other criteria prescribed by regulations. The Council may request information necessary to assess eligibility. Where an applicant may be suitable for provisional recognition rather than full recognition, the Council must inform the applicant accordingly. This clause also requires the Council, before commencing the receipt of applications, to publish guidance explaining how it will assess the recognition criteria, what it regards as appropriate financial management and accountability arrangements for organizations of different sizes and types, and what documentation applicants are expected to provide. This guidance must be kept under review. Clause 24 speaks of provisional recognition. This clause establishes the provisional recognition regime It is intended to accommodate organizations that are operating in good faith but are not yet able to satisfy all the criteria for full recognition. The threshold requirements for provisional recognition are deliberately light. An organization must be operating in good faith as a sports organization in Anguilla, have at least 10 members or regular participants, have a named contact person, and show genuine intention to develop towards full recognition. Provisional recognition lasts for up to 2 years. During that period, the Council is required to act as a development partner by providing or arranging for technical assistance needed to help the organization work towards full recognition. Excuse. A provisionally recognized organization may access Council guidance and support, may use public sporting facilities on the same basis as recognized sporting organizations, and may receive a development grant to assist it in meeting the full recognition criteria. It is not, however, eligible to receive grants from the sports fund on the same basis as it is as a fully recognized organization. The clause also requires the Council to determine and publish procedures and criteria for an award of development grants, including the basis for decisions, eligible purposes, maximum amounts, and accountability requirements. Before the expiry of the provisional period, the Council must review progress. It may invite the organization to apply for full recognition, extend the provisional period where genuine progress has been made, or allow provisional recognition to lapse where there has been no genuine progress after giving written notice and an opportunity to make representation. An organization may also apply for full recognition at any time during the provisional period if it considers that it has met the full criteria. Clause 25 speaks to Register of Sports Organizations. This clause requires the Council to maintain a register containing 3 parts: fully recognized organizations, provisionally recognized organizations, and recognized community sports contributions. The register must be available for public inspection. Clause 26, conditions of recognition. This clause enables the Council to attach conditions to recognition. Conditions may relate to governance and administration, safeguarding and welfare, financial accountability, reporting requirements, compliance with codes of conduct, and, in the case of provisionally recognized organization, development milestones to be achieved during the provisional period. Clause 27, suspension or revocation of recognition. This clause allows the Council to suspend or revoke recognition where an organization no longer meets the recognition criteria, breaches a condition of recognition, or acts inconsistently with the objects of the Act. Before taking such action, the Council must provide notice of the proposed action and give the organization an opportunity to make representation. The Council must then notify its decision in writing with reasons. Clause 28, consequences of loss of recognition. This clause sets out what happens when an organization loses its recognition. The consequences are straightforward. The organization loses access to benefits and support the support the Act provides, including eligibility for sports funds, grants, and Council technical assistance. The clause does not bar the organization from sporting activity generally. An organization that loses recognition under this Act retains whatever rights it has under the rules of any international or regional sporting federation to which it is affiliated. And those rights are entirely unaffected by anything this Act does. The Act's consequences operate within the domestic framework only. For example, loss of recognition under this Act would not affect Anguilla Football Association. Membership of FIFA or its ability to participate in FIFA sanctioned competitions. I will pause here and we would take some comments on the first five sections of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Timothy Hodge, the president of the Anguilla Cricket Association and a member of the Anguilla Bridge Association. There are three things that I want to mention, which are not necessarily so far in your presentation. The first, I think of great importance, is the recognition of boat racing as a national sport. I commend the drafters of the bill and the policymakers for putting this in here. I just want to make a suggestion. I notice it reads boat racing with a capital B and a capital R. There is boat racing, just like there is minister, there is premier, but when it has the significance that we'd attach to it in this house, it has a capital letter, and I think that our national sport should be accorded that respect. So I suggest that it be boat racing with a capital B, capital R. Secondly, there is somewhat of definition of sports, mentions athletics, and it mentions other sports, including boat racing. From my experience, certainly of late, because the Anguilla Bridge Association has been seeking support from the government and was told that it is not a sport that is recognized or a game that is recognized by the sports office. I hope I'm quoting correctly here. But dominoes is. That is strange to say the least. And because bridge is an internationally recognized game, Anguilla participates in the OECS Bridge Tournament. Did extremely well last year in St. Lucia in the 35th OECS Bridge Tournament. Came back with a lot of firsts and seconds, and will be represented in a couple of weeks in Dominica. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that there ought to be some specificity to this, and certainly sports that are played in Anguilla, which are internationally known and recognized, should be recognized. Thirdly, I want to bring to your attention, and I am not sure that this comes out in the benefits of the Act, the things that the Act will do for Anguilla to make a positive difference. Sporting organizations, any community organization in Anguilla for that matter, and I was made to understand over the weekend, even churches have great difficulty in functioning, utilizing the banking system, for example, having an account, opening an account, establishing a legal entity because of the strict provisions of the financial services legislation. Let me put it just one word to include all of it: company registration, etc. And so even the associations that would come under this act will have certain difficulties, then what about the sports clubs? A sports club that wants to function, an Eastern sport cricketing team or football team, for example, required to have all sorts of, meet all sorts of objectives and objections and, could find a lot more words, but I would just leave it at that. And I would hope that the Sports Act, among the other acts in Anguilla, will recognize that it is counterproductive to so restrict those who want to form community-based organizations that will keep our young people active and from following the negative pursuits which we see affecting our life in Anguilla. I thank you.
Good afternoon or good evening, depending on the time. I'm not going to assume that there will be no response from the head table to Mr. Hodges' comments, so I'll pause to see if there'll be any immediate reactions.
Jason is taking notes, so again, I think at this stage, whatever is said is recorded and is appreciated.
Thank you for that. So my name is Marcel Foy. Thank you for the opportunity to be here in that you have called this public consultation on the bill for the Sports Act. My first comment would not be about the content of the act, but the process of having the Sports Act. I'm grateful, I'm sure everybody is grateful that we now have a bill and we having public consultation. I don't know what the timetable is to take it to the House. I'm not sure of the procedures, but I would want to suggest that in terms of public consultation, that this is but one session, and that something like this really needs a number of sessions, and not just at the House of Assembly at 5 o'clock. Tim talked about, a team in Eastern or a team in Western or what have you, that might want to know how this affects them. Well, you're not going to get persons who maybe in those teams readily come into a session like this. Maybe they work in the hotel sector, so they work now while we're here. So I think it's important to really look at going out into the community, right? And he referenced like churches, etc. And in going to the community and having a consultation, it need not be in a school, it could be in a church hall, where you get collaboration from the church authorities in that case. They can communicate with their members. So we really get wide participation. Because this is sports. And if you start thinking about the different sports, you would have a list of 100. Right. So that's my first comment. The second comment I'll make, and I got a heap of them, but I ain't gonna really shout at them today. If they have other sessions, I'll refer to them. I want to take up one of the points that Tim made in reference to bridge. I don't play bridge. He'll have to teach me how to play bridge. I know dominoes. I haven't played dominoes in a long time. So dominoes is recognized as a sport currently, I understand from what he is saying, but bridge is not. I took the time, once I had a chance to look at a quick look at the bill, and I start with interpretation. And I saw athlete, fine. And I actually Googled sports, right? And the definition spoke about physical activity. The sport that one is engaged in must be one that involves physical activity, right? And based on that, ordinarily, something like dominoes, I guess, would be excluded too. But I asked the chat GPT, however you got around to, I asked them directly if chess is a sport. The answer came back, is recognized by the Olympic Committee as a sport. I asked if bridge is a sport. Basically, it said yes again. And interestingly, it described them as mind sports. But a body like the Olympic Committee, which we don't talk about Olympic sports, we talk about Olympic Games, right? But they recognize chess. The Olympic Committee recognizes chess. They recognize bridge. People recognize dominoes. So I think that really needs to be looked at. And why does it need to look at it? Because we have traditional games. Let's use a broader word, games, just like Olympic Games is sports and whatever else they include in it, right? We have traditional games. Dominoes is one of them. Whist and bridge and those things, among certain sectors, been played for decades here. And maybe there are one or two other things as well. So it's important to, first of all, acknowledge the traditions. So the boat racing, excellent. But let's don't leave out any other tradition that at least has been played from when I was a little fellow, right? And I've been around for a while. And not recognize them in some way, shape, or form. So even the title, sports, as I thought about it, I wondered if that may not, in the normal interpretation of sports, be over-focused on physical sports, right? But when you talk recreation, there are a lot of things one could be doing that don't require physical sport, but it's recreation. But this draft is seeking to address recreation as well. So we need to really look careful at it and make sure that the potential contradictions in there, we iron them out. Driven by the idea that, first of all, we acknowledge what we have been doing for decades here, for generations. Even the more recently introduced sports and games and so on, and activities, say in the last 20, 30, 40 years, right? I think that is vitally important. So the very first note I made as I was going through it was definition of a sport and differentiation from games. I don't necessarily feel that you got to differentiate them, but you got to be clear in your mind what you want to cover under the umbrella of the National, the Sports Act, right? So key ingredient, physical activity. But then, as I said, I did a little Googling and I see mind sport. So we got to deal with that, right? And then I raise a question in my mind, because this is an omnibus act. This is all embracing the way I understand it, right? And we know that sporting is an industry, right? And if this is the overarching act, just like you talk about objects and reasons and so on, and we say aim to this, that, or the other, are we acknowledging and recognizing in the relevant section of the act that speaks to objects and reasons or aims of the Sports Council or what have you, those important elements where a whole industry, a whole industry, but multifaceted industry, we want to develop that around sports, not just the physical sports, but other things, right? That maybe don't require as much physical activity. So we have to ask ourselves whether this is sufficiently acknowledged in this act. Because you see, what you say in here will have an impact on the thinking and the minds of who you will select for the Sports Council, and for everybody else who come involved in making this act actualizing it, right? And if you're having reviews, and I'm sure there'll be a process of accountability, so one will be looking to see what the Sports Council did or didn't do. You're going to take this up first and foremost, and whatever policies develop around this to see if they have been carried out their mandate adequately. So sports in terms of industry, I do see that it recognizes the link with tourism, right? But even beyond tourism, more generally, because with sports, you know, if you develop sports very well, then there's sports shops, there's this, there's that, there's all those things that can, you know, tie into it. So I think that's one aspect. And then, again, I figure there's a very key linkage between sports and well-being, health and well-being, right? And I know the Minister for Sports is also the Minister for Health. And I know the Minister for Health and his sidekick, Nakuhuda and Sanko Panza, I don't suppose that's not the right one, but the star and the number two, pushing hard to achieve some improvement in the overall quality of our health in the country. And if we're saying that in one breath, and then we come with the other breath when we talk in sports, and we having this act, this bill for this act, sports, vital to improving the well-being of people, not just in terms of physical well-being, but the mental and the psychological as well, the ability to relax, to play a game of cards, right? And that kind of thing. Very important. So what I'm saying is I didn't see the drafting, what you call it again? Not the drafting rules, but, you know, that would have gone to the AG's chambers. But in thinking about what you want to go into the document, I think the linkages, more attention to those linkages and to emphasize. Because the mandate that you're giving the council would be a mandate that if you don't have anything like that addressed in there, then that part of the mandate to coordinate, to work with, to whatever, and collaborate. And it does say that one of the functions of the council is to collaborate with different agencies, right? So I just mentioned that. There are one or two other things I could refer to under that vein, but I'll just give those two examples as an idea. I didn't have enough time to go through the entire thing, every clause and subclause, and that's why I'm suggesting that that's my reason why I suggest there should be additional opportunities for public consultation, because only yesterday I got the information on accessing this, right? Obviously, I wasn't just sitting down waiting for this to come in. I spend all day reading it. I have other things to do. So, but I'm interested in for example, the financial arrangements for the National Sports Council. Just from my quick check through, I wasn't able to identify fully and properly the financial arrangements for that. And so that is something that I will take a further look at. But what I want to say is there's a provision for a sports fund, but that's to help develop sports. But the council got to operate, right? The council supposed to meet 4 times a year minimum. There's provision for a secretary and other people that you need to employ. Now, if you set in a mandate of whatever level, maybe I'm suggesting even a bigger mandate than what is in here, but whether it's just a mandate that is in here, and you think about, well, what are the administrative, operational resources that need to be put at the disposal of the council to make it possible for them to be effective? Because we could tell a person, I charge you to do this, I charge you to do that. But to carry out what you charge me to do, I got to have resources. So I'm just saying there's a need to look at that. As I said, I didn't get a chance to look at it carefully, so I'm speaking kind of with a certain amount of caution, but I think we need to look at that. My final comment I'm going to make, as I said, I have to go to some of the other sessions that you all might have because I have some other comments as well. But two comments, they're kind of related. The size of the council, 5 to 7. I'm one of those who feel in a developing society, right, that where not many of our people have experience and exposure to situations where they become decision makers, where there's involvement in policy development, involvement in visioning for the country. And this is a visioning bill, okay? And even from a democratic standpoint, with a small d, we should think, when we create certain institutions, have a bigger council, have a bigger whatever. You have the chance to bring in more people who may be starting off green, first time introduced to these things, young people especially, right? And give them that exposure. They become the cadre for whatever else you're going to be doing later on, and so on and so forth, right? Quick example. National Bank of Anguilla, defunct. But National Bank of Anguilla had a powerful impact in this country, and CCB too. National Bank of Anguilla provided for 13, right, Tim? 13 directors. Not by chance. He and I were two of the original promoters. We specifically said, have a large board. You can bring people in from a succession planning standpoint. You bring in young people and so on and so forth. So it was to give more people exposure. So the next time something come up and you need a board, whether it's government need a board or somebody else need a board, there's a cadre of people who already have familiarity with these things, right? That was deliberate. It might seem a simple thing, but that's the way you got to think about these situations, right? And my final comment related to that is, as I looked at the criteria in considering people for the council, I don't think I saw anything that speaks to somebody who got a depth of experience in a particular sport, right? I don't think I saw that. Let's see. Which one that is? Composition of the council? Yeah. Sporting administration, finance, or accounting, law, or governance, medicine, or athlete welfare, or safeguarding minors. I think in something like this, you who've been in the sports, in it, find somebody who have that experience. Maybe they have some of these other experiences as well. They might have some of this other area of knowledge, but they've been in it, right? And that brought me to the idea, well, it don't look like a council can have anybody on it that are representative of sport. And sport is so wide, so many different things. So even from that perspective, a bigger council opens up the opportunity to say, hey, if you got all of these sports organizations that can be registered, currently they're registered with the sports department and so on, and eventually they can become recognized, whatever's the word here in the thing, then it seems to me that the people in the sports themselves should be on the council, right? So that is my comment. The other thing, quickly, is it talks about capable of being to sue and be sued, and again, not having enough time to look through it carefully. I'm not sure to what extent there are clauses and sections on finance and accounting and that kind of responsibility. Because if you can sue and be sued, that means that you better have access to resources to sue. You better have access to resources in case you be sued and you're found liable, right? So to me, there's a need to make sure. Again, I say this cautiously because I wasn't able at least to go through, and I don't like to go through things in a hurry. I like dealing with this section, let me really think about it. Think, outside of the box, people will say, but I don't think outside, I just think about how this thing can impact, right? Sorry for taking so long, but I thought I should be realistic enough and, say my piece, how I see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foy. Just to say that the first reading will be on Friday the 22nd, 10 o'clock in the House of Assembly. But I take your point, or we take your point, of not just waiting for people to come to us, but going to them. So again, by having the first reading means that it's another step closer to our goal. And the idea is that we reach out to everybody. And the mind game, sports is very much a mind game. Yeah, so again, so obviously dominoes and tiddlywinks is bridge, sorry. And chess, it's all a mind game. Right.
Good afternoon, everyone. Everybody's so sleepy in here. I did not have a lot of time to read through the bill. So the recommendations and things that I'm going to state this afternoon are just my first brush impressions from the bill, sorry. I do want to place on record that I think that this is a very good step for sports. I think it's necessary to have a comprehensive framework to which the sporting organizations can look to with clarity for the position for their development. That being said, I do think that there are some areas in the bill where the bill is silent, where I think it could benefit from some fleshing out. And one of the primary areas that I have seen some silence in this bill is in relation to potential conflicts between sports. So we speak about the development of sports, the selection and representation and participation in sports, and in relation to the council having responsibility for facilities, but there may be situations where you will have multiple organizations maybe falling under the same sport or same umbrella, where there may be scheduling conflicts, sports conflicts in relation to their facilities, and even on some occasions conflicts in relation to the athletes themselves. And I think that the bill should look to see how it can implement or introduce some mechanism for the resolution of those conflicts. And even particularly if you have facility allocation issues, some type of dispute resolution would actually be very important. That being said, I've also seen that the council makes decisions in relation to the recognition of certain sporting organizations. Now, I haven't been able to go through the whole thing, and I don't know if I am overlooking a part of it, but that section relating to the recognition of sporting organizations is again silent where there is a situation between the council and the sporting body, and there is a conflict between them in terms of their ability to be recognized. So if a sporting organization submits documents to the council for recognition, and the council then says, well, to our estimation, you have not met the threshold or criteria, if the sporting organization says, well, I disagree with your assessment, there is no further way to appeal or to move forward. So it would be beneficial to have some type of independent panel to review those decisions so that there's a little bit more trust in the mechanisms of the act. I do also believe, and I mean, the one thing that I do appreciate about the bill is that the bill recognizes that a lot of the individuals who participate in sports are volunteers, but there is a little bit of an in-baked-in assumption in some level of administrative capacity. And if we want to be focused on the growth of sport, where most persons in Angola are predominantly, they're doing the work of organizing the sport. They're being present in coaching the athletes and the persons who come before them. So many of them do not have as much of the administrative support as they would like, where the council is providing some technical assistance and support. I actually think that the council, very similarly, but a little bit in a different train to Mr. Foy, should seek to provide some administrative support. Because if you talk to the sporting associations and bodies, the biggest challenge that most of them are facing is in relation to administration. It's not their passion for the sports or their ability to be present for the athletes. It's the work. Just a bit of clarification, because I saw a section referring to the council taking on a number of responsibilities which would have ordinarily have been the responsibilities of the Department of Sports, if I'm correct. Yes. If the council is, and here's where my general concern is, if the council is taking on a number of those responsibilities, which would have prior been seen as responsibilities of the state, the composition of the council then becomes much more important. And the language is a little bit loose in my estimation in relation to the desirability of certain persons sitting as part of the council and their quote unquote relevant experience. If they are taking on the responsibilities, including under the Financial Administration and Audit Act, which carry offenses, there are offenses under the Financial Administration and Audit Act, I would think that this council, which is formulated as a statutory body to a certain extent, would have baked into its body or composition someone in law and someone in finance. Those would be positions that are not debatable. So just give me 1 second to look to see this section. Right. So section 12 to financing and accounting law or governance. Again, there is some leeway here, but it says shall have regard to the desirability. And I'm not really sure what that language really intends to mean, because desirability isn't really a legal provision. That doesn't mean anything if you understand what I'm getting at here. It's either I shall, so you have positions where you shall appoint persons in particular roles, or you shall have regard for the desirability, which means that it's ultimately a matter for the construction of the minister to decide, I desire it or I don't. So I think that that's something that the legislation needs to consider. But I would also go a little bit further to say that while there are some members that are being appointed by the minister, I think it's important that the bodies, I'm not sure if Tim said this or Mr. Foy, that the sporting bodies themselves should have the ability to recommend persons to sit as part of that council. Right? I'm getting through my list. I just made a quick list while I was sitting there. My last point is in relation to the funding mechanisms. And that is in anybody want to shout me where I'm looking at? What's one, part 12? Huh? The sports fund, yeah. Part 12. Huh? All right, 61. Okay. Now, the sports fund here, there's again, for me, I would like a little bit of clarity as to what are the responsibilities of the Department of Sports that are being transferred over to the council, because from my recollection, certain things like athlete development, et cetera, would have fallen under the Department of Sports' budget. So is it that because the provision says that it shall only, these monies shall only be applied in this particular way, is it that the council is now the only body that will be applying funds towards athlete development and things of that nature, and not the Department of Sports hereafter? No? Okay. Anyways, you can answer it whenever you get the chance to. And then a little bit of clarity in relation to sports tourism and sports industry development. mostly the sports tourism part. Because this is a bit of a looser, a wider term, is there a catch-all phrase here that can work instead? Because from my perspective, where you are starting a fund for sports development, the primary interest in the application of funds towards sports development would be in the development of strong communities. So sports as a community building, sports as development for athletes and young people, sports for health benefits. I'm trying to understand where let's just say in our first sports fund budget, the money for sports tourism outside of those other categories is meant to funnel into. Because we all know that irrespective of where we are, we know that our funding generally can become restricted. So I'm trying to understand what that means in the context of this legislation. I also believe that it's really important for transparency purposes that wherever decisions are made for the mechanisms of the allocation of funding, because the Act is silent on the mechanisms for the allocation of funding. It speaks about the creation of a sports fund, the application of the FAA, but does not speak to the mechanisms related to the allocation of funding for sports. So if a decision is made or taken in relation to funding a particular program, how does the public get access to see, well, how are decisions being made for the fund? Because the difference here being in a general budget under the Department of Sports, those estimates fall under that particular department. But for estimates that come under this sports fund, are those included separately? How are those then discussed? And then discussed in terms of their allocation and the allocation mechanisms across all sporting bodies. Because like Mr. Foy said, you might have, 100 sporting associations? You don't know. But then how does one look at and justify certain decisions made in relation to sporting bodies and sporting organizations? I see that there's a tiered system. So you have provisional, you have those who have full accreditation. Well, it would have been accreditation. There's a new language now. And then you have community bodies. But when decisions are made, let's just say for a sporting body like basketball, where you have a number of athletes, and then you may have, for athletics, you'll have 2 individuals going off or representing Anguilla. It's still important to my mind for some ability to objectively assess how funding is being applied across the sporting bodies from the sports fund, so that there's no insinuation at some point that some sporting bodies are being treated unfairly in comparison to others. So I think that the legislation should speak to the allocation mechanism, or even if the Act allows the minister to set regulations, I haven't seen it here, but regulations specifically dealing with allocation criteria for the fund. And I think those would be necessary for giving the transparency that other bodies may want to see in terms of the allocation of finances. That was supposed to be my last one. But I do want to know, generally speaking, the motivation for moving to legislation is that you have an objective basis for enforcement and consequences. Now, I have not seen, other than in Section 67, any offenses or penalties. So is that the only section that deals with consequences for? I just saw the section in section 68, so I answered my own question on 68, but 67. This is the only section that relates to consequences, right? And enforcement. That's it?
As for the act itself, yes, but there are regulations that will be developed to support those elements that deals with that element as well, in a
Okay.
number of areas.
And I'm assuming there'll be public consultation on those regs as well.
As always,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Well, that's all I got to read. And hopefully you guys do have a second consultation, so that, persons who are interested can come with additional questions. And obviously, if you've had the chance to review the questions that have been posed this afternoon and beef up the bill to a certain extent, then less questions next time around on my part. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, and again, the thing is that this consultation is about getting feedback and how we're meant to be a team, and the idea is that we get it right. And if there are amendments to be made, then by all means, that will be done.
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, as I was saying, like most persons express, this bill came out probably 2 days ago, and 2 hours for consultation is woefully short of what's needed for a sports consultation.
For the first one,
Right. And I think we'll be the first one. We already to have a good impression where we can get enough information to move forward. And I believe it would have served us better if we had, say, have discussions with immediate sports associations first. Maybe they could know, put in things that would like to see in the bill, and then we go to the wider public. However, though, as I say, I'm going on assumption because we couldn't go through it properly to read and digest. But at some time ago, we did try to put on sports and recreation at its sport department. But recreation is very wide. Recreation is everything. If you have some people deciding going walking every Saturday morning, it's recreation. It's not sport. And if you decide you're going to go to those who are cycling on Saturday mornings, cycling is a sport when it becomes a competition, but not being doing for exercise. It's a difference. And yeah, and every physical activity that you do, it becomes a sport when it becomes a competition. When you're doing it for other activities, for health, it's for health. So we have to be very careful with how we frame in this entire bill and the parameters that the sport department and the sports council gonna lend their support to. Because many of us know, coming up to the older ones, we played marbles. We played, we call it tops. So everything, we did a number of things is what a competition. So if depend on how this bill is structured, person can get together and say, hey, let's form a group of 10 people and we come for support, you know? So we have to be careful. Now we have this amateur sport, pro sport. A person started doing sports primarily for fun. As you get better in the sport, you have opportunity to make money from the sport. You can make money secretly, privately. And yet you can still be coming to the government for support. Is that fair? So we have to know if you're doing the sport and you're making money from your sport, should the state still be supporting you in your sport? So we have to know what the bill is going forward to. Representing Anguilla, I'm not sure everybody who goes overseas in a competition say they represent Anguilla. Sometimes it's an invitational. You decide you're going to St. Martin to a boat race. 4 boats go over. Were these boats chosen by the Boat Racing Association, or they decide they have the opportunity to go? Then you have regional international championships. So we have to know if we can support every invitational competition. Are we going towards regional international championships? I see we say sports as a business. Any water around? I need some water, please. Water. Take a picture. So, No. Sports as a business. We know some persons say you may be doing martial arts and you charge a fee for martial arts. The martial arts team going overseas, you want support. It becomes into question. And you find, if I decide, okay, I'm going to hold exercise classes, I'm going to do gymnastics, these people are very fit, I take them for a competition. So we have to know exactly what we're covering in this Sports Act at this point in time. Well, I talked earlier about pro athlete and developing athlete. We have many cases where some persons are very much in the developmental stages. I mean, you're training, you're going overseas, you're doing things. Then you have the athlete who reach the pro ranks now, and they're living overseas, they're training overseas. Is it the same support that they get? So the bill could have to, I think we need a lot of consultation, otherwise you have to keep making amendments. Games and physical sport, like become the question of bridge and dominoes, whist, cards have a number of card games. So we have to look, see if these card games, or table games rather, should be classified as sport. Every sport, you need to use a brain. Whether it's physical, you're playing football, you're playing cricket, you still have to use your brain. The table games, you're sitting down, you may not be so physical, you're using the mind games. And I'm not sure if anywhere in the Act talk about recognition and awards schemes. Like say persons who perform at a certain level, achieve certain gold, silver, bronze, whatever sport you're doing, you win certain tournaments, or do they have particular standards, levels of award, whether it's monetary award. We know some persons, when they go overseas, they get land, they get $10,000, some get real good recognition awards. What obtains in Anguilla? So in terms of the entire sports bill, I would wish that, yes, thank you very much. All right, I'm good now, almost good. Yeah, so I was saying that in terms of this bill, right, I'm not sure what's the hurry to get it placed the first reading for Friday, but I think it's maybe half-baked. I don't know if it's ready to go to the public yet I'm not sure how the bills go. If we have a timetable to know, okay, the first reading is on Friday, we have a chance for X amount of consultations, because I think Mr. Foy mentioned that many of us are not that steep into these whole bills and acts and stuff like that. But a lot of us have ideas about sport, what should obtain, what should not obtain. Are we going to consult, say, other countries in the Caribbean who may have similar situations like us to see what obtains for them? So we don't do something for Anguilla that is so different from other places. For me, the way I see sport, a sport department, we look at two main areas: how we can increase participation and how we can improve performance. In brushing to this area, I'm going to read part of it. I'm not picking that up as yet. How we going to improve participation and how we going to improve performance. Because for a country to be recognized through sports, it's larger through what your participants, what your performers are doing out there. Everybody could talk about Omari, we could talk about Zarnil, we could talk about Gemma, we could talk about Shari, because they have been out there on the international scene performing. So, as I say, we didn't read through it. How is this bill gonna put Anguilla name out there through performance? If we lay a large foundation by increasing participation, we have a much larger target group, a bigger pool to draw on. So, I believe every act, every bill, every law have its values, but to me, some of the early approaches in sport development for Anguilla should be focused on improving performance through more participation. And that covers coaches, facilities, other resources, a number of things. So, as I say, we can speak all day about what we would like to see happen for sports in Anguilla. The bill may speak on a small aspect of it, but there's a lot left to be desired for sport development in Anguilla and in the country for that matter. So I would hope that, like Mr. Foy say, if we could take this to different sports associations where they can discuss it in their sport associations. We have the football, the cricket, the athletics, the basketball, the volleyball. The sport department have all those organizations. We have them sit in their group, look through the bill, see how the bill would either help them or affect them in whatever way. So that's our area for consultation, sports associations. Now we talk about community sports. Are we going to recognize the sport association in Anguilla? Like say we have the Anguilla Volleyball Association, but they have a church group playing volleyball. They may not be a club, but it's a group playing sport. Can they come and get the individual support? So there's a number of things that we have to, when we read the bill in more and be able to digest it, we will see how these things are addressed and dealt with here. So as I say, we have to read it, and I hope the other consultations would not be hurried like this one, and we can go through more.
Well, the thing is, I'll be selfish in all of this. Ideally, I wanted it to get at least the first reading to the House of Assembly before Anguilla Day to recognize boat racing as a national sport. You could put anything into law, but at the end of the day, it's the people that makes the difference. You could have a Bible thick, but still, it doesn't matter what's written on the paper. It is what the people are prepared to do about what's written on the paper. So all the suggestions are well received, and I think the key is that we want to feel that everybody is involved in all of this, because some of the persons that just support sports, they're not part of any organization, not an athlete themselves. They probably have more heart attacks than the athletes, because when you sit and watch sports, especially someone you've got a passion for, the chances are your heart rate beats a little bit faster, probably too fast at times. So the whole point is that of this bill is to make sure that we continue to take Anguilla forward, the development of our youth through sports, all sports, because there's something about the bond that brings our people together. So it's not rushed. What is might be rushed is to make sure that it goes to the House of Assembly for the first reading. We've talked about boat racing as a national sport for how many years, but it's not been recognized. For the boat racers who go around the island and have to go through the Narrows, and I've been there. I mean, not just in a racing boat. You know, you understand that these guys go through a lot, and it is a national sport. So for me, it is personal about taking this to the House. Cricket was my profession. Cricket's probably got me where I am here today. But what I do know that when it comes to sport, any type of sport, it helps to build us as a people, build us as a nation, whether the athletes are performing here in Anguilla or overseas. So we will go to those who are playing dominoes under the trees. And in fact, I'm a matcher. I can't play dominoes like some of the guys. I can match features. I can play my hand. And I'm amazed that even a sport like dominoes, that some of the guys, when I was growing up in West End, that they might not have been academic in school, but they could count quicker than any accountant. So that's what a card game or a game like that can do. But again, I might have digressed a bit, but the fact is, whatever is suggested here, if it's to make the development of sports better in Anguilla, then we will do it. Not just elected members, but all of us here in Anguilla.
Good afternoon, and thanks to be here. And it's a good start, and I think we need a little bit more time to meet with the associations so we could find out their problems, and then we could work together to form the sports council. I think that we have a lot of people in Anguilla with experience, so we need to go to them, have more meetings, and bring them on board, and they will be part of the sports council because they have the experience and they know how to get it work. I think it happens so in every country. The other people on board, no problem with that, but it have to be sports. And I would like to see the sports department have their function to do also. So even though we form a sports council, we'll still have the sports department doing things. And having this bill is good, but we need to also have meetings talking about facilities, because we just can't have a bill and then we have no facilities. So we have to do this and make it a whole, and sports is the way to promote Anguilla, and we got to help our young people. You understand? We got to recognize them for their talent. So that's all I have to say for now. We have to work together, and we need to have more meetings. We need to bring everybody on board. We have a lot of former players who did well for Anguilla, and we cannot let them out. So we have to get them on board, and we need to have more meetings. Blessings.
Thanks, Rakit. And again, another point too is that some of the best coaches in world sports were not necessarily the best players. So because somebody was not an athlete, it doesn't mean that renowned athlete does not mean they don't have the ability to manage.
Okay, I'm going to say something quickly too. Okay, Anguilla Cricket Association, Leeward Islands, also Vice President Cricket Board. So we're all talking about sports here. Oliver McDonald is my name. Again, we didn't have enough time to really go through this bill in detail. That's the way that we should, but I would endorse most of what most of the person would have contributed this evening. I think it's very, very valid points. And some of the areas that I think this bill not only silence on, but probably may have missed is really looking more at the well-being of some of our players, or all of our national players. I'm speaking at the national representative level right now. I know, for an example, most of our cricketers, and we know cricket gears has to be imported. And we believe that some kind of, if we can fit in this bill a way to accommodate, not only for cricket, but most gears that are coming through Anguilla, or sport gears or whatever, so it should be considered some waiver of duty-free or something of that nature. That should be really, because I mean, just the other day we had an example, one of our cricketers who they import a bat. He's a national player. Not only a national player, he's a non-belonger. He also has SUA issues. He would have actually purchased a bat for $300 and end up paying $200 just for do this. You know, things like that. We have to find a way where we can give consideration to remove some of these rules for many national players. We also have some players, not only in cricket, but I'm sure also some of other sports as well, where they're non-belongers and they have to travel to represent Anguilla. We would have experienced it in cricket as well. And they require a visa to return back to the island. That visa costs $500. That visa could be waived. And at the moment, there's no legislation in place to do so. So those are two things that we really, really need to look at. And we would have spoken to the ministry and the cabinet before about players, you know, they come to cricket, as we all know, it's one of the most expensive sports. I shouldn't say so because I learned recently bicycling is also an expensive sport as well. We would have players, national players again, leave the island, represent the island, 10 days off from the island, off from the families, off from their jobs, and return it back with nothing. You know, I would like to see us address that as well. Find a way how we can provide a stipend or something to definitely consider them, because we talk about national representation, and at the end of the day, we just kind of appears go well. I do understand that the bill speaks about other policies making under the council, which I expect some of these things may be given consideration, can be done separately outside of the bill. The other thing I would like to see add to this bill is some form of a placement center organization, because there's a lot of skill and talent. But at the end of the day, we, you know, Anguilla is, you know, as far as we can go. We need to have something in place where we can not only scout, but have these players, have places where we can actually send these players. We call it a placement center, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in England, whether it's the US, so we can help them advance in these different areas. It's the same thing with cricket. And not only just send them away, but we have to really certainly find a way to support them in these areas. So those are the three areas that I think we may want to consider. Of course, the bill is quite silent and quite a bit of it for sure. But I noticed that the bill also speaks about policy under the council that would be introduced. So I would expect some of these things to be introduced as policy going forward. Those are my little contributions. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to adopt the protocol that's already established, meaning that I didn't get a chance to look through every single part of the bill. That's why everybody been saying at the beginning. But one of the things I wanted to ask about is, I mean, I didn't see specifically, I see in here where they talk about, oh goodness, support for athletes pursuing scholarships, high performance, et cetera, et cetera. Talk about training costs, equipment, travel, participation in competitions. It's not only for athletes that are pursuing scholarships, but also for athletes that are traveling. So I'm asking about in terms of medicals, because I know I represent the Volleyball Association, and for us to participate in regional tournaments, we have to go through medical, we have to complete medical forms that are certified by the FIVB. And so we don't have, you know, a designated team doctor. We have to go through the actual healthcare system and have these forms signed and stamped by our medical team. And you have to pay for these things. And some of those, like the tests that you have to go through, like it's not just fill out a form, you know, check your blood pressure, you know, how do you feel? It's not something very subjective. Some of them have to go through, you have to do ECGs, you have to do blood walks, you have to do a number of different tests, and these tests have to be paid for. So I know that I see in here it's about the sport fund, but I didn't see anywhere specifically in the act. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to read through everything. I tried, but there's nothing specifically about, you know, the medical fees that might come come into play with these competitions and with athletes traveling toward those competitions. And also, somewhere in the bill, we should have that, you know, we need some other sort of medical support, people designated for our athletes. We know our healthcare system is already drained. We need physical therapists. We need athletic trainers. We need all kind of things to deal with our athletes. It's not just volleyball. It's our athletics, our track and field teams, our football teams, our netball team. Everybody needs that kind of support. And so, apart from in the ministry and in this act, in the council, wherever, we need to look into also boosting our medical support on the side so that we can address all these injuries that our athletes may have, you know, because they can get injured from zero going all the way up. And so we don't want, you know, a promising athlete that, you know, maybe a 15-year-old that, you know, had an injury doing long jump. And then that's the end of their career because, you know, oh, well, my mom doesn't want me to have surgery, or, you know, I wasn't able to do therapy. I wasn't able to pay for surgery or, you know, our therapy, those kind of things. So we need to make sure that we boost up our medical backing in terms of health of our athletes so that we can, you know, improve the longevity, we can improve their performance and help to carry them further. That's all.
Thank you very much for that. I think it is very important because for instance, like primary school sports, whether it's football or track and field, that we ask the very young to go out and run as hard as they possibly can. And if there's an injury, I'm not sure whether or not they're covered. We expect the parents to do it. But I think, again, it's not just about the act, but we as a government or as a people and coaches need to come together to make sure that our athletes are looked after.
We could also have, I know we've done it before. I've been to a workshop and stuff like that before, but we need to get all our coaches, because like we said, a lot of our coaches are volunteers and everybody doesn't have the same background, but we need to make sure that we're not overtraining our athletes, especially our children. We have to make sure that we have some kind of regulations, that we follow some sort of pattern so that we don't have, you know, children being injured with, you know, tendonitis and overuse injuries from being overtrained. Because, I mean, like we know our facilities aren't the greatest, but at the same time, we need to use what we have and do things a little bit more, not necessarily on a level playing field, but using the proper standards, more internationally recognized standards. What is that word? That word.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Shanella Carter, for those who don't know me. I stand in the gap of drag racing this evening. I heard you mention, Minister, about boat racing, but what I would like to say is I saw the past president, may his soul rest in peace, Preston. He have a number of, you know, things that have been signed off and passed, and nothing have been done for the Drag Racing Association. And I would like to see where and how this bill would walk around the Drag Racing Association. I know that we have Drag Racing Association drag racing is a big thing in other places. We know that persons have been traveling back and forth. I know Antigua advertise it as a tourism sport. I know if we really get to where we would like to get, it could be a big thing, and we can have heads and beds, we can have a lot of things. So it could be another income for Angola. So I would really like to see how this act will play around drag racing and how it become. That's my 2 cents.
Also, we've got a colleague in government who is very much keen on racing, on drag racing. So, name is called. No, well, it's time. It's just a matter of time.
We've been having both sides of the government, you know, things have been passed, but no movement. So like I say, I really want to see where it's gonna bring us.
Sorry to come back on stage again so soon, but I just flipped through it somewhere and I going to part 9. I know should we go on to part 9 with state with regard to anti-doping and sporting integrity. Right.
We just for the record, we did only up to part 5.
That's why I say.
So we asked to pause, we paused. You want to jump to part 9? I don't have an issue there. We'll hear you as well. And-
Well, yeah, I just was looking at, we have the last line which states, anti-doping requirements do not apply to local sporting competitions conducted solely within Anguilla. So we just wonder what the thought process was, where we're saying the requirements do not apply to local competitions. Yeah, I was just wondering what the thought process in terms of if we say that anti-doping requirements do not apply to local sporting competitions conducted solely within Anguilla. I mean, should we put something like that in the act, or should we just stay silent on it?
Mr. Rollins, Richardson, we take your concern on
And
board.
you look at it. Okay, all right, not this. All right.
Yeah, Rollins, just to add, in terms of that, and I don't know if I should go ahead and make my general comments that I was going to make, but I will do it at the end. Those other areas will also be addressed through policy, as the Act has been specifying from the beginning.
Thank you, yes.
Any more comments from the floor?
Yeah, 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm a little late to the meeting myself. I was doing boat racing on the way to get here in time from Prickly Pear. My name is Laurie Gums, and most of you know me perhaps as associated presently with the Anguilla Sailing Association or the Anguilla Youth Sailing Club. I'm not really prepared to speak this afternoon. I did email the sports.gov.ai email address the other afternoon asking for a draft copy on Friday afternoon when I first received the notification, asking for a draft copy to be emailed so that we could have time to study it and perhaps raise pertinent questions. I now understand, I was thinking I was way behind and this notice had gone out weeks ago. I now understand that it's really only Friday that it went out, so I can kind of understand why I got no reply. But I think that doesn't necessarily speak to, but from all of the comments here, all of the speakers, I missed, unfortunately, Tim's comments. But I think what everybody is saying is two things. One, open it up to more input. There are many more people that must have input, pertinent input, relevant input, and important input before it goes to the House. Now, I'm going to take issue with Cardigan here for a moment because he mentioned that he wants to get this boat racing as a national sport of Anguilla into the House of Assembly before Anguilla Day. And that we've been talking about it for years and years and years and years, and nothing has happened. He's completely right. And I think it deserves the attention that it has not gotten up until this point. Boat racing is a huge thing in Anguilla. In fact, we make a joke and we say boat racing is not the national sport of Anguilla. Arguing about boat racing is the national sport of Anguilla. Which shows you how passionate it is for everybody in this country. But I think for as much as you want to compliment the sailors by pushing this through in time for Anguilla Day, I think it is such a large and complex thing that it is a mistake to do it the disservice of pushing it through without the input of the relevant people. It is of no benefit to push an unfulfilled or an uncommented on bill before the House. before the relevant people have really had a chance to look at it. I've had 5 minutes or half an hour to sort of look at it. That's not really public consultation. That's like, here, we're going to ram this through, and then we're going to fix it after. I'm not sure about that. And I think the other thing is, before we do something that important, particularly when it reflects to something like boat racing, is that it deserves to be treated properly. All of the sports deserve to be treated properly. All of us need to have input throughout the various communities and throughout the various organizations, need to have time to read this, to look at it, and to give proper input. The other thing is, what is boat racing? What is boat racing? Is it powerboat racing? Is it poker run? Or is it sailboat racing? Boat racing really isn't a term. It's the local term that we use for it, and I understand that it has great sentimental value to Anguilla to call it boat racing, because that's what we call it. But at the same time, when we go out into the world and have to represent ourselves and deal with other associations or apply for funding from different places and so on, we also, as the young lady said, want to look somewhat professional while we're doing it. And if we're going to put this into the Act, I think we need to put it into the Act and call it sailing, because it is sailing. I know we're all passionate about about boat racing, but it actually is called sailing. And for us to apply, part of the stuff that we're going through now is to figure out how to apply for international funding for sailing in Anguilla. And if the Act is boat racing, are we going to have difficulty applying for funds for boat racing as opposed to going and applying for funds for sailing? I don't know, but I think it speaks to our professionality to be able to say to the world, hey, we are the hottest little sailing island in Anguilla, and we love our boat racing. You know, so I'm just trying to put ourselves into context here. I don't think that's the most important thing that I'm going to say here this afternoon. I think the most important thing that I'm going to say here this afternoon is, one, much more people. Everybody said that there's need for much more input from various sporting organizations. I completely agree, and I beg you not to rush this through. I beg you not to rush this through without the proper consultation. We need to open this up to much more people, and it needs time for discussion. If you want to honor Anguillan sailors, and I completely commend you for that, and I agree with you, do them the good service of getting as much input as you can before this goes into the House of Assembly, please.
Thank you, Laurie. Again, as I said, it's the first reading. The act of the bill will not be passed on Friday. So the key is, as I said, to start the process. And for what I do know, by going through the island, it could take us 2-3 years, because everybody's got an opinion. And by all means, you appreciate that. But my point is that you have to start. And we start by having the first reading. There's no debate. There will be no debate in the House on Friday. There will be no debate on Friday. Again, it is about passing it, having the first reading. The other thing about boat racing, the fact is that the question would be the tradition of Anguilla's boat racing as it goes back to before motorboats. For them, it was boat racing. So should we change it? They knew it as boat racing, not as powerboat racing. But again, your point is taken.
I call it boat racing as well. But if I need to go somewhere else and represent Anguilla as far as this sport goes, for me, I have to use the word sailing. You know? Yes.
I didn't intend to come back up here, but the last comments caused me to come. I have to disagree with you, Larry, because culture, boat racing, that's culture. Sailing is sailing in general. Anguilla boat racing, don't change that. Explain to the person you're going to, give them a little bit of your culture when you got to go to the rest of the world. right? We're not talking about sailing in general. We're talking about angular boat racing. The open boats without a deck or even a half deck. That's what you're racing. That's angular boat racing. It's just like people that want to change the name Anguillian to Anguillan. So they had, I think in the last change in the Constitution says it's Anguillian, I-A-N. Even if in terms of grammar, you're supposed to say A-N. The point is, we always call ourselves Anguillian, I-A-N. Same thing, boat racing. We can say to the world, this is what we are. We do boat racing, but we also sail power boats. We do sailboats. We do whatever, right? We do pond boats. But we have boat racing, a specific sport. The 20-some fellas on the big boats, that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? That's unique. So don't go water down the uniqueness by calling it sailing, angular boat racing. And then when we're promoting the other areas of sailing in angular, the regatta, powerboat, what have you. We can do all of that, but that's a particular niche. Don't water it down. That's a particular niche. And then we have the broader sailing in angular. With that, I got it.
So again, I want to thank everybody for your participation. And again, as I said, the idea is to take this to the House on Friday for the first reading, but I can promise you that we will go to the length and breadth of Anguilla to get the opinion and the input, not just opinion, the input of all who are concerned about sports in Anguilla. Whatever your sport might be, the idea is that we feel that everybody has an input. We can agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, it is important to hear what people have to say. Thank you.
If I have any comments, who do I sports department? And it going through the paper, I definitely will,
Well,
have an input.
you're asking in terms of follow-up, what I would have mentioned earlier was that persons feel free to email their comments into the ministry. I'm saying email, handwritten, typed, we will take them. The key thing is, one thing is expressed in here. We have it in writing, we can make sense of it, we can discuss it with the drafters, see what's applicable, see what we can work with from a practical standpoint, but also to ensure we address the concerns raised. Because what we have, as the minister outlined, is the first draft, if I could put it that way. The consultations will continue with associations, with coaches, and regardless of the sport, and also the issues that were raised surrounding the links to tourism, the links to health, and also the need for the medical aspects, just naming a few. Those things will be discussed, and we'd want the input. One thing is you telling us. We capture some notes here, but the actual detail of it would be useful if you could provide it in writing.
Okay.
So from your areas would be unique, and we need to understand how best to capture those things.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Proctor?